There is a secret that burns at the core of the Dark Angels, a truth so damning, so poisonous, that it has been buried beneath 10,000 years of silence and blood. This secret has no name spoken aloud, only whispers exchanged in darkness, hidden behind sealed vaults, cloaked rituals, and oaths that bind even the greatest heroes in chains of shame. This is the truth of the fallen. They are not traitors in the conventional sense. They are not the black-clad legions of Horus, nor the demon-kissed servants of the ruinous powers who openly declared their heresy. No, the fallen were once brothers. They wore the green of the First Legion, stood beside the lion, and bled for the Imperium in its darkest hours. But something broke within them. A fracture that split the Legion, not just in body, but in soul. To understand the fallen is to understand the depth of betrayal that can only come from within. They were there during the Great Crusade, warriors of unmatched precision and discipline. The Dark Angels were the first among the Emperor's chosen, older than Guilliman's 13th, more storied than the Wolves or the Scars. They were the First Legion, the model upon which all others were shaped. Their warriors were scattered across the galaxy in the final years of the Crusade, and many fought and died far from Caliban, their homeworld. But for those who remained behind, stationed on Caliban under the stewardship of Luther, a slow and quiet rot began to take hold. Though this is not the tale of Caliban's fall itself, it is important to understand the impact. When the warp storm shattered Caliban, it was not just a planet that was torn asunder. The fabric of reality convulsed, and those within the grip of Luther's rebellion were cast into the immaterium. Time lost all meaning. Distance became irrelevant. The fallen were not merely scattered. They were flung through the warp like debris from a shattered soul, hurled across time and space. Some emerged centuries later. Others materialized in times and places far removed from their origin. For many, it was as if no time had passed at all. And when they reappeared, they did not come back as brothers. The Imperium they returned to was no longer the realm they once served. The Great Crusade was over. The heresy had ravaged the stars. The Emperor was a broken god entombed upon his golden throne, and their Primarch, the Lion, was lost, his fate unknown. And so these scattered sons of Caliban became something else. Outcasts, ghosts, the fallen. Many were hunted as traitors. Some had indeed embraced their heresy willingly. Others still clung to the ideals of the Imperium, convinced that what they had done was not treason, but a justified rebellion against tyranny. A handful, in their ignorance, believed they had never committed any crime at all. But for the Dark Angels, there was no room for doubt, no room for mercy. They called them the Fallen, not just because they had strayed from the path, but because they had fallen from grace, from honor, from loyalty, from the brotherhood that once defined the Legion. To the inner circle of the Dark Angels, their existence was a cancer that could never be allowed to fester. The shame of the betrayal was too great, the wound too deep. It was said that the true reason for the Dark Angels' aloofness, their secrecy, their sudden and unexplained departures from battlefields across the galaxy, was the hunt, the ceaseless, unrelenting pursuit of the fallen. It became their obsession. Entire task forces were deployed without explanation, their official records falsified or erased. Interrogator chaplains were dispatched across the stars, following leads gathered from Xenos ruins, demon-scarred archives, or whispered confessions torn from cultists' lips. Each fallen was more than just a rogue marine. They were a fragment of guilt given form, a scar that refused to heal. Some of these exiled warriors gathered followers of their own. Some disappeared into the shadows of the Imperium, hiding in remote worlds, living as mercenaries, warlords, or even humble guardians of backwater colonies. Others succumbed fully to the warp, drawn to the siren call of chaos. A few tried to atone, though they would find no redemption in the eyes of their former brethren. The Dark Angels offered no path to forgiveness, only capture, interrogation, execution, or worse. There are stories told in secret, cautionary tales among the successors of the First Legion of those who came too close to a fallen, only to vanish without a trace. Of prison cells deep within the rock, the mobile fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, where ancient and broken warriors are held for millennia, subjected to relentless interrogation by robed figures whose identities are known to none outside the inner circle. It is said that even death is no release for a fallen angel, that the sins of the past weigh too heavily to be absolved. But the most chilling aspect of all is this. The fallen look like Dark Angels. They fight like them. They speak the same oaths, recall the same battle hymns. They share the same memories of the Emperor's glory, the same tales of the Lion's triumphs. And yet, they are anathema. What divides them is not armor color or allegiance to chaos. It is a moment of choice, long ago, when they raised their blades not in service to the Emperor, but against their own kin. This is why the hunt must never cease, why secrecy is paramount, why even among allies the Dark Angels speak little and trust less, for to admit the truth of the fallen is to admit the Legion's failure. It is to acknowledge that even the greatest of the Emperor's warriors were not immune to doubt, or pride, or betrayal. And so the Dark Angels carry their burden in silence, striking from the shadows with unmatched precision. The galaxy sees them as stalwart defenders of the Imperium, cold, distant, but reliable. They do not see the ghosts that haunt every company, the oaths whispered behind sealed helms, the quiet interrogations in the depths of their ships when a battle ends and a suspect is found. They do not know of the Council of the Inner Circle, or the endless debates over what to do with each new clue, each new fallen brought to light. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But for the Dark Angels, there is something else as well. A secret war fought not against aliens or heretics, but against the very remnants of themselves. And it all began with the shadows of betrayal. There is no grave for the fallen, no monument etched with their names, no honored place in a librarium or fortress monastery. Their fate was not sealed by fire or blade, but by the silent, ravenous mouth of the warp. When Caliban was torn asunder, it did not simply die, it was erased. The warp storm that consumed the planet was not a natural phenomenon. It was an echo of the rage and betrayal that had been building for years, a psychic scream amplified by the warp's hateful hunger. In that instant, less than a heartbeat, yet lasting eternities, those who followed Luther vanished, not by escape craft, not by teleportation or retreat, but by sheer, uncontrollable force. The warp devoured them, a maelstrom of unreality swirling with hate, sorrow, and madness. And from that storm, they were flung, not merely into space, but into different times, different realities, scattered across the galaxy like leaves in a cosmic gale. Imagine it, warriors mid-oath, mid-battle, mid-prayer, suddenly torn from existence. A brother standing at your side one moment, a shriek of reality breaking the next, and he is gone. No warning, no logic, just gone. Some emerged centuries later, stepping from warp rifts onto alien worlds without knowing how long they'd been gone. Others landed in the age of apostasy, or at the brink of the Great Rift, long after their names had become curses. And some, perhaps, have not yet arrived, destined to fall from the sky in eras yet to be. This is the tragedy of the fallen. Even in their punishment, they were denied unity. Even in exile, they were cast apart. They could not form a new legion, could not regroup, could not even call each other brother. They were lost in time and space, flung like sparks from a shattered forge. Every fallen tells a different story, wears a different scar of displacement. Some remember the final days of Caliban vividly. Others speak of fog, of the warp clawing at their memories. For some, only rage remains. For others, only confusion. And in this scattering, the seeds of chaos were sown. Some of the fallen awoke to find themselves alone on dead moons, or wandering ruins on ancient worlds. Their first acts were survival, hunting for food, shelter, meaning. Some encountered imperial settlers who mistook them for angels or monsters. Some were captured by rogue traders and sold into hidden prisons. A few even served unknowingly, alongside loyalist chapters who never questioned their armor's green hue. But always, eventually, the past caught up. Others emerged directly into the heart of horror. Hive cities in the grip of chaos cults, demon worlds bristling with madness, or Xenos-controlled sectors where their humanity was but a whispered myth. These fallen were tested and many failed. In the warp, time is a blade, and it cuts differently for each man. Some succumbed to its whispers, to promises of vengeance, power, purpose. Others resisted, clinging to their oaths, though those oaths now meant nothing in a galaxy that no longer remembered them. Still others were warped more subtly. A fallen might wake in the future with no memory of who he truly was. He might be taken in by a planetary militia, rising through their ranks as a mysterious savior. He might become a local god, or a ghost story, or a protector of forgotten colonies. He might even believe himself to be loyal, until a dark angel finds him. Because the hunt does not rest. The Dark Angels, in their obsession, began to notice patterns. Disturbances in the warp, sightings of figures in old First Legion colors, psychic echoes that resonated with familiar shame. Wherever a fallen appeared, the galaxy seemed to warp slightly around them, an echo of the warp storm that had cast them away. Interrogator chaplains began to map these disturbances, chasing rumors that had no business being true. Over time, it became clear the fallen had not died. They had simply scattered. But what made this scattering so dangerous was not just that it made them hard to find. It was that it made them impossible to predict. One might find a fallen leading a chaos warband in the eye of terror, his soul blackened beyond redemption. Another might be discovered meditating in isolation on a jungle world, a holy man who no longer remembers his name, but preaches peace and humility. One might raise a demon banner, another might defend a civilian convoy from pirates without ever revealing his face. Some travel the galaxy seeking others like them, trying to rebuild the Legion, not as it was, but as it should have been. These misguided idealists often become the most dangerous, believing themselves justified in striking down the Imperium that cast them out. And then there are the dreamers, the fallen who still, against all evidence, believe that the lion will return, that somehow they might be forgiven. These are the ones who leave messages behind, cryptic symbols etched into rock, coded transmissions sent into the void. They speak of redemption, of unity. They call out to others in the warp, hoping, praying that they are not alone. The scattering then did more than save them from death. It transformed them. Each fallen became a legend unto himself, a wanderer, a symbol of loss or of hope, depending on who found him first. But while they wandered, the galaxy turned. The Imperium forgot them. Their names were scrubbed from records. Their victories were reassigned, their honors revoked. In some cases, their very existence was denied. And yet, the warp remembered. Chaos remembered. The gods are patient and they love broken things. They whispered to the fallen in their dreams, offered them meaning, vengeance, power, and some, too many, listened. Yet not all. There were those who resisted, who walked away from the darkness even as it offered them salvation. These are the paradoxes of the fallen. They are not uniform, not united. They are a diaspora of shame and defiance, of pride and penitence, each one a relic of a crime committed long ago, but experienced anew every day. This is why the Dark Angels can never rest, why they hunt not just traitors but potentialities. Each fallen is a crossroads. Left unchecked, he might become a demagogue or a demon prince. Or he might become something else, a hero, a martyr, a reminder that the truth is never simple. The scattering made certainty impossible, and in that uncertainty, danger thrives. There are whispers among inquisitors and librarians of a phenomenon they do not understand. Individuals appearing seemingly from nowhere, bearing the genetic markers of the First Legion, but with no records, no origins. Most are taken, silenced, but some slip through the cracks, bearing stories that shake the faithful to their core. A man claiming to have fought beside the lion, another who knows the activation codes of pre-heresy relics, a third who weeps when he sees the Aquila, as if remembering something long lost. The warp storm that scattered the fallen was no accident. It was a curse, a judgment, or perhaps a test. To be cast into the stars is to face the void with no map, no banner, no name. And those who survived its bite returned as more than traitors. They returned as enigmas. Each fallen, then, is not just a warrior. He is a fragment of a broken truth, a possibility, a ghost walking in a galaxy that would rather forget him. And as long as they remain, the shadow of the First Legion's greatest sin lingers on the stars. For the stars themselves bore witness to their fall, and now they bear witness to what they have become. He was once the lion's shadow, a warrior without peer, a leader of men, and a voice that could move hearts more easily than it could command swords. His name was Luther, second only to Lionel Janssen in the hierarchy of the Dark Angels, a brother in arms, a trusted confidant. But titles can be deceiving. Proximity is not loyalty, and admiration can fester into envy. Before he was called traitor, before his name became anathema to the sons of Caliban, Luther was a hero. He had stood at the lion's side when the forests of Caliban were purged of great beasts. He had been entrusted with the defense and governance of their homeworld when the lion led the First Legion into the stars. The Emperor had granted them the tools of the Space Marines, and in this union between knightly valor and astartes discipline, the Dark Angels were born. But when the stars called, it was the lion who answered, and it was Luther who was left behind. It is here that the seeds of disaster took root, not in rage, not in heresy, but in abandonment. Luther had tasted greatness during the early years of the Great Crusade. Though never quite the equal of the Primarch, he had stood among the high command of the Legion, fought in campaigns that shaped the galaxy. But his reassignment to Caliban, to tend the hearth, as it was diplomatically put, felt more like exile. And exile breeds bitterness, especially in a heart that once knew fire. For decades, Luther governed Caliban. He turned its militias into a functioning recruitment pipeline for the Legion. He trained thousands of astartes, but the lion never returned. Not truly. Communications were sparse, recognition absent, and over time admiration curdled into resentment. The men under Luther's command began to listen more closely to him than to their distant Primarch. Some even whispered that Luther was the true soul of Caliban, that the lion had become a creature of the stars, distant, inhuman, unfeeling. These whispers did not originate with Luther, but neither did he silence them. And the longer the lion stayed away, the louder those whispers became. Then came the war. The Horus heresy fractured the galaxy, but Caliban remained far from the front lines, forgotten, some might say. When news of the betrayal reached them, the details were fractured and unclear. Many of Luther's followers began to question the Imperium's path. Was it not the Emperor's own sons who had rebelled? Was the Imperium truly a shining beacon of truth, or a hollow empire of lies? Luther began to speak of self-determination, of Caliban's destiny. And in those dark, uncertain days, he began to gather allies, not through conquest, but through rhetoric. Luther did not declare open war. He did not don the sigils of chaos or offer sacrifices to the dark gods. He preached liberation, autonomy, a Caliban free from distant masters. And as the heresy raged on, his vision gained momentum. The lion, after all, had been gone for so long. Who was he to rule? Who was the emperor to demand obedience from across the stars? By the time the lion returned, the rebellion had already taken root. When the fleet of the First Legion emerged from the warp and set course for Caliban, it was not met with salutes and celebration. It was met with fire. Orbital defense systems, long silent, roared to life. Batteries constructed in secrecy spat plasma and flame into the void. The Lion's ships, caught unaware, suffered grievous losses. The Brotherhood that had once defined the Legion fractured in a moment of horrific realization. Caliban had turned. It was not just Luther's betrayal that shook the Lion. It was the betrayal of those he had once called sons. Warriors who had trained under him, fought beside him, and now aimed their weapons at his heart. The battle for Caliban was swift, but not clean. Space tore itself open. The warp howled in rage or laughter, it's unclear which. And amid the planet's destruction, amid the cataclysmic forces unleashed by psychic backlash and orbital bombardment, two figures met at the eye of the storm. Lion L. Johnson and Luther, brother against brother, master against disciple, order against rebellion. They say the duel lasted only moments. That psychic fury poured from Luther like wildfire, fueled not by chaos patronage, but by raw, broken emotion, a storm of guilt, grief, and fury given form. They say the lion, wounded in soul as much as in flesh, held back, refusing to strike a killing blow until it was too late. And they say that when the final blow fell, it was not death that took Luther, but madness. When the storm broke and the ruins cooled, the lion was gone. Luther was found broken, weeping, his mind shattered. The Watchers in the dark, enigmatic guardians of the rock, took Luther into custody. He was interred in a stasis cell deep within the hollowed remains of the rock, once Caliban's mightiest fortress, now a space-borne cathedral of secrecy. There he remained for millennia, silent, isolated, a relic of treason, but a relic still alive. The inner circle of the Dark Angels never told the Imperium the full story. The Horus heresy had left the Imperium fragile, reeling. The revelation that one of the Emperor's loyal legions had torn itself apart, had warred against itself, could not be allowed. And so the truth was buried. The fallen were named heretics, hunted in secret. Their existence was denied. And Luther became a ghost story even among his own sons, yet he endured. And that perhaps is the cruelest part, because Luther was not dead, nor did he rot. He remained in his cell, speaking to no one, his thoughts his only company. And in that void of time, something changed. We do not know what broke him, but we do know what freed him. In the wake of the Great Rift, the cataclysmic event that split the galaxy in two, the rock came under assault. Warp storms battered it. Chaos forces launched an incursion. And when the battle was done, the Dark Angels found Luther's cell shattered. He was gone, vanished into the void. Some believe he was freed by chaos. Others claim Cypher, another legendary fallen, was involved. There are even whispers that the Watchers themselves released him, believing that some part of his fate had not yet been fulfilled. What is certain is this: Luther walks once more, and those who have encountered him since speak of a changed man, not a frothing zealot, not a demonic host, but a preacher, a prophet, a man who believes he was right all along. He has gathered new followers among the stars, fallen, who see in him a new purpose. Not just rebellion, but restoration. a vision of the Imperium free from tyranny, or perhaps simply a world where they are no longer hunted. The arch-traitor has returned, not as a conqueror, but as a whisper. And in the shadows of the galaxy, those whispers grow louder. There is a saying among the Dark Angels, one never spoken in the presence of outsiders, one that never finds its way into formal litanies or battle sermons. It is passed down in whispers, repeated in the shadowed chambers of the inner circle, behind locked bulkheads and gene-coded seals. Until the last is found, we are unforgiven. To the galaxy, the Dark Angels are paragons of martial discipline, silent warriors draped in robes, carrying relics older than most civilizations. They are aloof, methodical, and relentless in battle. But beneath that iron discipline lies something deeper. A burden, a mission, a war that no one outside the First Legion is meant to know, and it all stems from the oath, the unforgiven oath. When the flames of Caliban's destruction faded, when the warp storm had receded, and the stars shone once more on the ruined remnants of the First Legion, the survivors did not grieve. They did not mourn. They did not even speak openly of what had occurred. Instead, they gathered. The most senior commanders, the most trusted chaplains, the highest librarians, those few who had seen the truth and lived. They formed a council in the ruined halls of the Rock, now a drifting husk of their former fortress. There, amid broken statues and scorched banners, they made a decision that would shape the next 10,000 years of their existence. They would bury the truth. No record would speak of Luther's betrayal. No archive would list the names of those who had turned their weapons on their brothers. Caliban would be remembered as a world destroyed by the vagaries of the warp. The Lion's disappearance would be cloaked in reverence and mystery, and the fallen, those once beloved sons who had broken faith, would be stricken from the Legion's history, forgotten, denied, but they would not be forgiven. That was the heart of the oath. The fallen were not enemies to be destroyed. They were brothers who had sinned, and that sin was not a wound to be cauterized, it was a debt, a spiritual wound that could only be healed by confrontation. Each of the fallen would be found, each would be judged, each would be brought to justice, not for vengeance, not for retribution, but for redemption, for the redemption of the entire chapter. Because until the fallen were accounted for, the stain of their betrayal would mark every Dark Angel who bore the Legion's gene seed. From this point forward, the First Legion was no longer whole. It was unforgiven, and thus the oath became sacred. It transcended rank, role, and even the battlefield. From the moment a battle brother was inducted into the Dark Angels, he began a long and secretive ascent through the layers of the chapter's inner hierarchy. Only those who demonstrated unquestionable loyalty, stoic willpower, and unwavering faith in the Lion's cause were permitted to learn fragments of the truth. For many, the knowledge came slowly, drip-fed over centuries. For others, it came all at once, a brutal initiation into the inner circle, where the full weight of the oath was laid upon their shoulders. These warriors learned that their chapter's true war was not against the Xenos, the heretic, or the demon. It was against themselves. The hunt became the defining aspect of their existence. Every action was measured not only by its tactical importance, but by whether it furthered the ultimate goal, the capture and redemption of the fallen. Reports of rogue astartes in green armor, planetary uprisings led by warrior kings wielding Calibanite blade styles, fragments of Dark Age armor discovered on abandoned outposts. Any clue, no matter how small, was pursued with the full force of the chapter's obsession. It was not uncommon for entire campaigns to be redirected at a moment's notice, allies abandoned, victories left incomplete, all because someone, somewhere, whispered the word fallen. To those outside the chapter, this behavior was maddening. The Dark Angel's reputation for secrecy grew with every unexplained disappearance, every refused communication, every mysterious detachment that arrived, demanded access, and left with prisoners in chains. Imperial commanders filed complaint after complaint, but they were ignored. Inquisitors were stonewalled. Other chapters were kept at a distance. Even the High Lords of Terra could not pierce the veil, because no one outside the Unforgiven could be trusted with the truth. And the Unforgiven included more than just the Dark Angels. In the wake of the heresy, when the legions were broken into chapters by Robut, Guilliman's Codex Astartes, the Dark Angels did not protest, but they ensured that every single one of their successor chapters, known collectively as the Unforgiven, was founded from their own loyal sons. The Angels of Absolution, the Angels of Redemption, the Angels of Vengeance, and many others, cloaked in different colors but bound by the same hidden truth. Each was indoctrinated slowly, carefully. Their leaders were invited into the inner circle. The oath was passed to them in sacred rituals, and they too joined the hunt. Thus, the Unforgiven became more than a name. It became a secret brotherhood spread across dozens of chapters. A shadow war fought in silence, linking distant strike forces and orbital fortresses into a network of pursuit, interrogation, and execution. Sometimes two Unforgiven chapters would meet on a battlefield with no explanation given. Orders would be exchanged in coded rituals. Then one force would vanish, chasing a phantom while the other held the line. There was no higher priority, no greater honor, no deeper shame. For the fallen were out there, still breathing, still hiding, still unjudged, and until they were all accounted for, the wound within the First Legion would remain open. The rituals of the Inner Circle became increasingly arcane. Robes of mourning were worn, candles of black wax burned in silent cathedrals. The Book of the Fallen, written in cipher, recorded every confirmed sighting, every capture, every death. Those who captured a fallen were honored with ceremonial markings, etched in silence, never displayed to the outside world. Those who failed were often never seen again. Some were punished, others volunteered to join the Death Wing, the chapter's elite, where death was expected but no man was ever questioned about what he had seen. The oath also created tension between secrecy and duty, between vengeance and justice. Not all Dark Angels agreed on what to do with the fallen once captured. Some argued for execution, others for redemption. The interrogator chaplains, sworn to break the will of the captured, walked a fine line between torturer and confessor. There are whispered tales of fallen who broke under questioning, not into confession, but into madness, of captives who died before they could speak, of others who spoke too much and left their interrogators shaken. And yet, still the oath remained. Still the hunt continued. Still the Dark Angels stood in the light for the Imperium, while waging a war in the shadows no other chapter would understand. They do not speak of the oath. They do not ask for forgiveness. They do not seek praise, because they know what they are. Not heroes, not traitors. They are the Unforgiven, and they will be until the last is found. His name is a lie, his presence a question, his purpose a riddle wrapped in a mystery buried beneath 10,000 years of shadows. He is Cypher, and he walks the galaxy cloaked in legend, bearing the most forbidden truths of the First Legion. To some, he is the betrayer of betrayers, to others, the last hope of redemption. To the Dark Angels, he is the most wanted man in the galaxy. To the enemies of mankind, he is a specter of wrath. No title fully captures what he is. Not heretic, not prophet, not warrior. And yet he is all of these things and something more. He is the Lord of the Fallen. Cypher did not choose his name. It was given to him long ago by those who could not understand him. A cipher, a code, a mystery, a man whose intentions could not be deciphered. He carries no rank, wears no sigils, commands no army. Yet his mere presence can turn the tide of battles, unravel war zones, or spark the paranoia of entire chapters. He walks alone, but his footsteps are echoed in every shadow cast by the First Legion's sin. The Dark Angels speak his name only in secret. Among the inner circle, he is their white whale, the one fallen they cannot ignore, the ghost who slips through every net they cast. He appears when least expected, often where the lines between loyalty and heresy blur. He has stood on battlefields drenched in blood and walked untouched through zones scoured by demon fire. He is seen one moment and gone the next, no trace left behind but silence and corpses. And always at his side, the sword. The blade he carries is a relic of unimaginable importance. Identified by some as the Lion Sword, the weapon once wielded by Lionel Johnson himself. The fact that Cypher carries it, unbidden, unsanctioned, is a truth the Dark Angels dare not speak aloud. For how did he come by it? Where was it taken from? Why has it not yet been returned? And most pressingly, why has he never drawn it? There are stories, of course, wild tales whispered by mortal soldiers and warp-touched prophets, that the blade cannot be drawn except in the Emperor's presence, that it is cursed, that it is waiting. Some even claim that Cypher has tried to return it, more than once, only to be thwarted by fate or design. Aboard the black ships of the Inquisition, deep within the Imperial Palace, on battlefields that should have been his tomb. Each time the moment slips from his grasp, each time the blade remains sheathed, and so he continues onward, a man carrying history's heaviest weapon, without ever using it. Who was Cypher before he became this living enigma? The truth is lost, buried in layers of lies, forgotten records, and deliberate obfuscation. Some say he was once a high-ranking officer in the Order, the knightly organization that ruled Caliban before the Emperor's arrival. Others claim he was among the last recruits trained directly by Luther. Some even argue he never existed at all. That Cypher is a mantle, passed from one fallen to the next. A living symbol of the Legion's guilt, meant to distract the Dark Angels from ever finishing their hunt. The oldest records hint at a truth, darker still, that Cypher may have once held the same title on Caliban that now bears his name. The position of the Cypher, a role of secrecy and ritual reserved for the custodian of the Order's greatest secrets. If this is true, then Cypher is not just a rogue marine, but the guardian of truths that predate the Imperium itself. Perhaps that's why the Dark Angels want him so badly. Perhaps that's why they fear him. Because wherever Cypher walks, secrets unravel. Entire campaigns have been derailed by his presence. There are confirmed accounts, though buried in redacted archives, of Cypher walking directly through inquisitorial lines without resistance, of him appearing in the middle of Mechanicus facilities and vanishing before alarms could even be raised, of him fighting alongside loyalist astartes in one battle, then alongside renegades in the next. None have ever truly known his allegiance, not even the Fallen. Indeed, the Fallen themselves are divided in their opinion of him. Some revere him as a visionary, a chosen figure leading them toward a future where they are no longer hunted. Others call him a traitor, claiming he abandoned their cause or works secretly for the Imperium. The truth, as always, remains elusive, but this much is known. Cypher is never where he is supposed to be. He never fights for one side for long. And his goals, whatever they are, remain maddeningly unclear. There is one incident, scrubbed from all official records, where Cypher came closer to achieving what some believe is his true goal, reaching Terra. During the opening acts of the 13th Black Crusade, as Abaddon's forces surged across the Cadian Gate, Cypher and a contingent of Fallen were discovered aboard a warped Imperial vessel known as the Eclipse. The ship had been lost for centuries, yet emerged from the immaterium in perfect condition, carrying a crew that had not aged a day. Aboard were data caches, relics, and Cypher himself. He was detained, not by the Dark Angels, but by the Adeptus Custodes. Witnesses, few as they were, described Cypher as calm, almost expectant. He did not resist. He did not plead. He simply asked to be taken to the Emperor, not to speak, not to ask forgiveness, simply to stand before him. But the moment never came. As he was being transported to the inner sanctum, the vessel carrying him suffered a catastrophic warp breach. No bodies were recovered. The containment units were found open, and Cypher gone. To the Dark Angels, this was more than an insult. It was a wound. They had failed again. Worse, they could not explain it to anyone outside the inner circle. How do you explain the hunt for a man whose very existence must remain secret? How do you share intelligence when no one is supposed to know it exists? You don't. You double the hunt. And so they did. Chaplains redoubled their investigations. Deathwing strike forces were deployed to distant sectors with no explanation. Astropaths were silenced. Even among the unforgiven successor chapters, the mere hint of Cypher's presence could galvanize entire crusades. And yet, the more they pursued him, the more questions arose. For Cypher did not act like a traitor. He fought against chaos as often as with it. He disrupted cults. He assassinated heretic warlords. There are accounts, fragmentary, classified, of him saving Imperial civilians. In one instance, he is credited with preventing the activation of a Necron tomb world by sabotaging its core. In another, he killed a rogue Alpha Legionnaire, attempting to infiltrate an Imperial shrine. Always his actions toe the line between rebellion and salvation. Always he escapes before questions can be asked. There is one final riddle. Despite being pursued relentlessly for 10,000 years, despite being the focus of the First Legion's greatest shame, despite carrying the Lion's own blade, Cypher has never once been confirmed to have killed a Dark Angel. He has fought alongside them, against them, but never slain one directly. Some say it is a code. Others believe he sees them not as enemies, but as kin. And a few, those who dare think such blasphemous thoughts, wonder if Cypher still considers himself a Dark Angel. Whatever his truth, he remains the great shadow on the Legion's soul. Not just because he exists, but because he endures. Because he knows more than he says. Because he carries the sword and does not wield it. Because he walks towards something step by step, battle by battle, and no one knows what he will do when he finally arrives. Cypher, the Lord of the Fallen, the secret that hunts in the night, and may yet be the key to the Dark Angel's salvation. Not all betrayals end with fire and blood. Some end in silence, in choices made behind closed doors, in whispered regrets, in paths taken too far to walk back from. Such is the fractured legacy of the Fallen. Because despite what the Dark Angels would have you believe, the Fallen are not a monolith. They do not move as one, speak as one, or fight for a singular cause. They are a shattered brotherhood, split not just by time and space, but by belief, purpose, and conviction. When the warp storm tore them from Caliban and scattered them across the stars, it didn't just displace their bodies, it broke their unity. It shattered whatever cohesion might have remained among Luther's followers. And in that ruin, each one of them became something different. They became a legion divided. The truth is simple and cruel. The Fallen had no orders after the storm, no Primarch to rally to, no central command, no Vox relays or astropathic contact. They were alone, cut off from everything that once gave them meaning. And isolation changes a man. Isolation, especially when it comes hand in hand with guilt or pride or fear. transforms you in ways war never could. Some of the fallen embraced that change eagerly. These were the ones whose hearts had already darkened on Caliban, the ones who had followed Luther not out of misguided loyalty, but out of ambition, resentment, hatred. They found themselves reborn in the eyes of the warp, demons whispering to them from beyond the veil, promising vengeance and glory. They joined war bands, forged pacts with chaos lords, and raised their banners high. They turned their green armor black, replaced the Aquila with blasphemous runes, and laughed as they painted imperial worlds with blood. These are the easiest for the Dark Angels to understand, because they are openly damned. But not all were so clear-cut. Others awoke on distant worlds with no memory of what had occurred. Years, even centuries, had passed in the blink of an eye. The Imperium they remembered was gone, the lion was missing, and everything they had believed was ash. Some tried to rejoin the Imperium, a few even succeeded, disguising themselves, serving in local militias, or blending into lost garrisons where their identity was never questioned. In forgotten sectors, there are planetary governors and mercenary captains who still bear the tactical skill of astartes, but hide their true origins behind carefully fabricated records. Then there were the zealots. These fallen believed their actions during the heresy were not betrayal, but righteous rebellion. To them, Luther was a liberator. Caliban's autonomy was a holy cause. These warriors did not see themselves as traitors. They saw themselves as loyal to a different truth. And they continued that crusade even in isolation. They raised their own banners, sometimes carving out fiefdoms on feral worlds, installing themselves as kings or warrior priests. In their eyes, the Imperium is corrupt. The Emperor is a false idol. And the Dark Angels are tyrants too cowardly to face their own sins. These zealots rarely ally with chaos, but they are no less dangerous, for belief is a powerful fuel, and theirs burns with the conviction of the betrayed. But the most tragic of all are the repentant, the ones who know what they did, who feel the weight of it every time they close their eyes. These are the warriors who remember Caliban not as a battleground, but as a home, who see Luther's betrayal not as a cause to champion, but as a stain they cannot scrub away. They hide not out of fear, but because they believe they deserve to. Some live in solitude on nameless worlds, building shrines of stone and silence. Others protect small settlements from Xenos raiders, taking no payment, revealing no name. There are fallen who have stood between demons and mortals, who have fought and died without ever revealing their origin. In the records of the Imperium, these are nameless saviors. But in the eyes of the inner circle, they are still heretics. There is no redemption in silence, no forgiveness in anonymity. For the Dark Angels, guilt is not enough. Confession is not enough. Nothing is. There is no central ideology among the fallen, no leader, no true organization. They are a diaspora of sin, wandering remnants of a legion broken beyond repair. They wear the same armor, speak the same battle cant, even share the same genetic seed. But they are not the same. To understand this division is to understand the true tragedy of the fallen. Not that they turned on their Primarch, but that, in doing so, they lost each other. One might be a warlord in the Eye of Terror, another a monk in exile on a desert moon. A third might be hiding in plain sight as a sergeant in a PDF regiment. They do not know where their brothers are. Many don't even know if the others survived. And those who do make contact often find themselves at odds, ideologically, emotionally, spiritually. There have been attempts to unify them. In the aftermath of Luther's reawakening, some of the fallen rallied around him again. Word spread in whispers. Luther lives. Luther calls. And those who still believed in his vision followed. But what they found was not the man they remembered. Luther had changed, his mind, shattered and reformed, now burned with visions. He spoke of liberation not just from the Imperium, but from the very cycle of betrayal and vengeance. Some found meaning in his words, others recoiled in horror. What he offered was not power nor even absolution, but revolution. Many turned away. Then there are those who follow Cypher. If follow is even the right word, he doesn't lead them in the traditional sense, but he inspires them. Some believe he has a plan, that he is moving through the galaxy with purpose, that he is building something. They follow his path, leave messages in old dialects, gather in secret locations where he was once seen, but he never stays long, never reveals anything. His silence breeds both faith and frustration, and so even those drawn to him eventually splinter off, forming their own splinter groups, each convinced that they understand his mission. There is no loyalty among the fallen, but there is recognition. When two fallen meet, by chance or design, they do not speak as strangers. There is a bond there, however faint, a mutual understanding that cannot be faked. They often share information, where others might be, what the Imperium has done, how the hunt continues. Some band together, briefly, out of necessity. But those alliances are temporary, always. Mistrust is baked into their very bones. And why wouldn't it be? They have betrayed and been betrayed by their Primarch, by their brothers, by time itself. They are all that's left of a legion that cannot forgive itself. And in their division, the Dark Angels find a kind of mercy. For so long as the fallen remain fragmented, so long as they remain leaderless, rudderless, they pose no united threat. They are ghosts to be hunted, scattered embers to be stamped out. But if they were ever to come together, if one voice rose above the rest, if one cause, vengeance or redemption, gained momentum, if they could become more than just shadows, then the unforgiven would have more than shame to reckon with. They would have a reckoning of fire. Until then, the galaxy continues to turn. The fallen continue to drift, some toward salvation, others toward damnation. A broken legion without a leader, a brotherhood without a home, and in their division lies both their curse and the last flickering hope of their redemption. The warp does not simply consume, it waits. It is patient in a way the mortal mind cannot comprehend. It does not come in fire and fury alone, though it often ends that way. It comes in whispers, in dreams, in desperate prayers answered by something that wears the Emperor's voice, but speaks with a serpent's tongue. For the fallen, cast adrift in time and space, broken from their legion, their world and their cause, the warp was not merely a backdrop. It was their cradle, their purgatory, and for many, it became their god. Not all the fallen turned to chaos, but those who did fell not with a scream, but with a sigh. Imagine it. You awaken, armor rent from warp travel, alone on a dead world. You do not know where you are, perhaps not even when. The stars have shifted. The signals of the Imperium are silent. There is no chapter to report to, no command, no Primarch, no Emperor in sight. Just silence. Then come the dreams. A voice calling you by name. A presence that knows your battles, your secrets, your guilt. And it does not judge. It understands. It tells you the truth the Dark Angels would not. That your pain is real. That your betrayal was never yours alone. That you were forged in lies, and it offers you freedom. The first fallen to turn did so quietly. They did not raise banners of the dark gods. They simply began to listen. They meditated in the eye of the storm. They read the signs written in madness. They accepted the gifts they once would have scorched from the flesh of others. Then they began to gather. They were drawn to places where the immaterium bled into reality. Demon worlds, warp rifts, corrupted forges. Places abandoned by the Imperium or too far gone to be reclaimed. They built nothing. They ruled nothing. They congregated, like crows to a corpse. Some were seduced by corn, their pride as warriors twisted into bloodlust. These became berserkers draped in broken relics of the First Legion, wielding plasma swords and bolt pistols caked in gore. They did not plan. They did not command. They simply killed. Others were marked by Nurgle, their bitterness turning to despair, their bodies swollen and rotting but unnervingly serene. These fallen preached the futility of redemption, spreading plague in the name of peace. The most dangerous of all were those who turned to Tzeentch. These fallen did not rot or rage. They plotted, sorcerers cloaked in the shattered heraldry of the Dark Angels, their minds riddled with fractured timelines and contradictory truths. They raised ruins into palaces of flesh and logic. They wrote false histories that changed the minds of entire populations. Their words were weapons, and they spoke them with venom and certainty. And then, of course, there were the ones who gave themselves to chaos undivided, to all the gods and none. Their loyalty was not to a power, but to the idea, the great lie they had made into truth, that chaos had liberated them, that the Emperor had failed, that Luther had been right all along. It was not just the gods who welcomed them. Chaos warbands, raiders, and traitor legions all made contact with the fallen. Some were cautious, having fought the First Legion in the long wars of the heresy. Others saw opportunity. Astartes veterans skilled in infiltration, terror tactics, and asymmetric warfare. The fallen made ideal lieutenants, shock leaders, or interrogators. They were tacticians with centuries of combat experience and no loyalty but to themselves and their agendas. But the fallen never truly belonged in these hosts. Even among the traitors, they were distrusted. Their origin marked them. They were seen as tools, not allies. The Black Legion used them sparingly. The word-bearers tried to convert them entirely to religious fanaticism, often with limited success. The Night Lords respected their utility, but feared their past. And the Alpha Legion? Well, it is said the Alpha Legion once tried to recruit a cabal of fallen into one of their more obscure cells. All that was found afterward was a derelict ship filled with the dead. Every Alpha Legionnaire executed with surgical precision. No explanation. No survivors. The fallen do not submit easily, even when they fall. But perhaps the most unsettling of all the chaos-tainted fallen are the ones who never appear monstrous. They do not sprout wings. They do not balk the names of their patrons. They do not lead armies. They simply disappear into the deeper reaches of the galaxy. They hide on demon moons, cloaked in memory and malice. They exist as rumors. Boogeymen used to frighten even chaos warbands. Some act as oracles. Others train cults, then vanish before they're found. They are enigmas in a realm of madness. There are those within the inner circle who believe these are the most dangerous of all. Not because of what they do, but because of what they know. You see, when a loyalist turns to chaos, they often discard their past. But the fallen remember. They remember the Great Crusade, the early doctrines of the First Legion, the secret rites taught by Luther, the tactics used by the Lion himself. When those memories are filtered through chaos, they become tools of corruption. They become weapons. And in a galaxy already teetering, that knowledge is priceless. The Dark Angels have fought many battles against these warped remnants of their past. One such confrontation occurred on the world of Axinor, where a fallen sorcerer known only as Malachi had built a cult city from the bones of a forgotten forge world. His sermons had warped the minds of over 100,000 souls, turning the Manufactorum into a shrine of living iron and suffering. When the Raven Wing descended upon the planet, they expected resistance. What they found was a fortress designed using Dark Angel's own siege protocols, strategies Malachi remembered from the days before the heresy. The battle was brutal. Half the strike force was lost before they breached the inner sanctum. And when they reached Malachi, he was waiting, not with weapons but with a book, bound in ceramite etched with old Calibanite scripture. He offered it to the interrogators. A chronicle of the Legion's truth, he claimed. Not a threat, not a curse, a gift. They killed him anyway. The book was never mentioned in the official records. What was done with it remains unknown. There are whispers in the rock of other fallen like Malachi, of a demon prince called Marbas, once a captain of the Ninth Company, of a trio of plague-marked warriors known as the Blightwings, said to roam the gloaming worlds beyond the Imperium Nihilus, of a being only referred to as the Choir, believed to be multiple minds fused into a single vessel by a warp entity who feeds on their shared guilt. Each of these represents a possibility that the Legion's legacy will not die in silence, but will be reborn in horror, and the Dark Angels know it. That is why the hunt intensifies whenever a chaos-aligned fallen is discovered. Why entire crusades are launched to recover a single name, a single soul. Because it's not just about redemption anymore. It's about containment. It's about preventing the truth from festering. It's about stopping these once brothers from becoming legends in the wrong hands. The fallen who have embraced chaos are more than traitors. They are living contradictions, knights who still bear the discipline of the astartes, now cloaked in madness, warriors of the First Legion, now generals of the damned. And for all their heresy, for all their corruption, there is one thing that haunts the unforgiven more than any other. Some of them don't regret it. They believe chaos freed them, that the Imperium deserved their betrayal, and that, in the end, they were never the ones who truly fell. They were the ones who saw clearly, and in that clarity, damnation found its home. There are wars the Imperium celebrates in song and sculpture, wars of worlds reclaimed, of Xenos repelled, of demons banished back to the hells from which they clawed their way into reality. These are the wars of banners and relics, of medals forged in the heat of glory. But there is another war, one fought in silence, a war that has no end, no honor, and no respite. It is not spoken of in high Gothic nor etched into the vaults of terror. It is a war of shadows, of obsession, and it is waged not in the name of conquest, but in the name of shame. This is the hunt. It begins, as it always does, with a whisper. Perhaps a signal intercept, uncoded, unsuspicious, yet speaking a name that should no longer exist. Or a fragment of power armor, found on a battlefield far from Caliban, bearing iconography that should have been buried 10,000 years ago. Sometimes it's a psychic echo, a dream shared by too many astropaths to be coincidence, a presence in the warp that resonates with a guilt the Imperium dares not name. The inner circle receives the report in total secrecy. No alarms sound, no ranks are assembled. Instead, the code phrases are uttered. Dark-robed figures gather in silent cathedrals aboard the rock, and candles are lit in black wax. An old ritual begins, unchanged for 10 millennia. The hunt is declared. The Dark Angels do not delay, not for a single heartbeat. Entire battle groups are redirected without explanation. Campaigns abandoned mid-strike. Imperial commanders are left in confusion as their Astartes allies vanish into the warp without a word. Planets are lost, enemies escape, alliances fracture, but the unforgiven do not care. To others, a fallen is an old soldier, a relic, an out-of-place enemy in a war filled with fresher threats. But to the Dark Angels, a single fallen is worth more than a dozen victories. They would burn a hive world to capture one. They have. They would sacrifice brothers. They have. Because the hunt is not about justice. It's about absolution. The hunt is waged by a select few, those who have climbed the secret ladder of trust and been invited into the inner circle. These warriors carry no rank that matters outside their chapter. They wear robes over their armor, their names purged from records. Interrogator chaplains, masters of the Raven Wing, veterans of the Death Wing, all are bound by the same silent vow to bring the fallen to heel one by one, no matter the cost. But the hunt is not brute force. It is precision, cunning, patience. The first step is always confirmation. Many suspected sightings prove false. Old armor scavenged by heretics, Chaos Marines masquerading in corrupted First Legion heraldry. Even loyalists gone rogue, wearing stolen relics to confuse and divide. The hunt demands certainty, and certainty demands blood. The Inner Circle sends its agents, Raven Wing detachments that operate like ghost assassins, sweeping through settlements, probing the minds of captured cultists, following the smallest clues. When the presence of a fallen is verified, the cogs of the hunt grind into full motion. There is no mercy, no warning. The Dark Angels strike like a scalpel. Entire cities are purged without explanation. Civilians interrogated, then silenced. Data slates wiped, local leaders replaced. Even planetary governors who once fought proudly beside the First Legion may find themselves taken, questioned under pain of death for any link to the traitor's presence. The fallen is always the target, but the damage done in pursuit is often collateral and immense. Some fallen resist openly. These are the easiest to deal with. They take up arms, rally cults or war bands, and stand their ground. The unforgiven respond with their finest, Deathwing Terminators whose resolve is steel, Raven Wing Outriders who strike like thunder, and chaplains who wield not only weapons, but the terrible burden of truth. Other fallen are more dangerous still. They hide. They embed themselves in loyalist ranks, or disguise themselves as wandering pilgrims, missionaries, or even loyal sons of the Imperium. These hunts can take years, even decades. Entire squads of Ravenwing may vanish while tailing a lead, only for their successors to find their helmets displayed on pikes. A silent message left by a traitor who knows he's being pursued. There are even rumors, hushed even within the Inner Circle, that some fallen let themselves be caught, only to escape later, with secrets pried from their interrogators' minds. The ritual of interrogation is as old as the hunt itself. Once a fallen is captured, they are not executed, not immediately. They are taken, brought aboard the rock, buried deep in the black labyrinth beneath its foundations, a place older than the fortress monastery itself. There the fallen is bound, not just in chains, but in oaths, in old Calibanite sigils etched into the stone. The watchers in the dark observe, the chaplains prepare, and the questioning begins. No record survives of what happens in these chambers. The interrogators do not speak of it, not even to one another. Some say it is torture, others something deeper. Rituals of remembrance, rites meant to awaken the truth within a fallen's heart. A final chance at confession, not to absolve them, but to justify the hunt. Rare is the fallen who speaks. Rarer still is the one who repents. But when they do, it is said their names are entered into the Book of Redemption, a tome that only one man is allowed to read, the Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels. Most names never make it there. They are written only in blood. But the hunt does not end with one capture. It never has. For every fallen caught, two more elude, and with each passing century, their trail grows colder, their presence harder to trace. The galaxy grows larger, the Imperium fractures, and the hunt becomes more difficult. Some within the Inner Circle fear they will never find them all. Others whisper darker doubts. What if the fallen don't want redemption? What if they're waiting? There are patterns to their appearances, strategic choices, worlds selected not for shelter, but for significance, war zones entered and exited with purpose, and above all, one terrible, inescapable truth. The fallen are no longer running in fear. Some are running towards something. The hunt, then, is no longer simply about retribution. It is about containment, prevention. If even one fallen gains the power, the followers, or the knowledge to unite the others, the consequences could be catastrophic. The First Legion's shame could become the Imperium's downfall. This is why the hunt intensifies. Not because the fallen are growing more numerous, they are not, but because they are growing bolder, smarter, more elusive. Each one is a potential spark, each one a mirror held up to the face of the Dark Angels, reflecting not just their failure, but the fragility of their faith. And for all their might, the unforgiven cannot bear to look too closely. In the end, the hunt is not truly about the fallen. It is about the hunters. Each Dark Angel who joins the inner circle must carry the weight of their legion's crime. Each must swear to sacrifice everything, honor, glory, even truth, to preserve the secret. And in doing so, they become not just warriors, but penitents. They are not chasing ghosts. They are chasing their own redemption. And the galaxy, vast and merciless, offers no solace, only more whispers, more clues, more prey. The hunt continues, and it will until the last of the fallen is judged, or until the last Dark Angel forgets why the hunt began. The galaxy burns, empires fracture, the warp bleeds, and yet, in the middle of this inferno, amid a maelstrom of shifting allegiances and ancient hatreds, something happened that no one predicted. Something unthinkable. One of the Emperor's lost sons returned, and at his side, if only briefly, if only in shadow, walked the most hunted figure in the Imperium. Not a loyal son, not a celebrated hero, but a heretic, a traitor, a ghost from Caliban's past. Cypher. When Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was reborn in the dark heart of the 41st millennium, it was a moment that changed everything. For centuries, the loyal sons of the Imperium had fought in their father's name without ever seeing his face. They built empires of faith and fire upon his legacy. They made war in his image. And then, suddenly, one of the Emperor's gene sons walked again. Guilliman's return was no peaceful homecoming. It was an act of defiance against chaos itself, and it sparked a desperate crusade across the stars. The Primarch would lead a hand-picked force, a strike across the galaxy, a mission to reach Terra and stand before the golden throne of the Emperor once more. It was called the Terran Crusade, and somehow, Cypher was among them. It is one of the greatest mysteries of modern Imperial history. How did the most wanted man in the galaxy, the Lord of the Fallen, the bearer of the Lion Sword, find himself within reach of the Emperor's own son? No one truly knows. Theories abound, each more unbelievable than the last. Some say he fought his way into Guilliman's presence, carving a path through demons and traitors to stand before the Primarch, blade sheathed, offering aid with no conditions. Others say Guilliman invited him, that the Primarch, awakened to a galaxy drenched in zealotry and blind vengeance, saw in Cypher a necessary evil, one who could move through shadows where even custodies dared not tread. And there are those who whisper that it was not Guilliman who sought Cypher, but the Emperor himself. What is known is this: Cypher played a pivotal role in the Terran Crusade. Eyewitnesses, later silenced or erased, describe a black-robed figure moving through battles with eerie precision. He was never at the front, yet never absent. When demonic gates erupted, he was there to close them. When cultist psychers threatened to unravel the Crusade's path, he ended them with a single bolt shot. He killed when it was necessary. But more than that, he knew things: coordinates, runes, rituals long forbidden. Cypher knew how to navigate the paths the Crusade had to take, paths through the webway, through the scars of the Great Rift, through secrets even the Eldar feared to tread. More than once, it was Cypher, not Guilliman, who saved the Crusade from annihilation. Guilliman tolerated him, but his own warriors never did. The Custodes, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Sisters of Silence, they all watched him like a coiled serpent, and rightly so. For Cypher never gave his name, never removed his helmet, never offered justification for his presence. He simply acted, efficiently, coldly, with purpose. But there was something else, something that none of them could deny, though many refused to voice it. Cypher was not working against the Imperium. He wasn't trying to sabotage the Crusade. He wasn't leading the Fallen in a surprise betrayal. He wasn't whispering to demons or plotting the downfall of Terra. He was helping, every step of the way. And that is what terrified them most, because if Cypher wasn't an enemy, then what was he? A spy, a double agent, a madman driven by some unknowable logic. Or perhaps, and this is the theory that lingers even in the silent hearts of chaplains, perhaps Cypher was not fighting against the Emperor's will. Perhaps he was fulfilling it. The Crusade reached Terra. Though battered and scarred, it made it through. Guilliman stood before the Golden Throne, and the Imperium was changed forever. But Cypher, he never got that far. Before Guilliman could intercede, before the Emperor could, if he ever intended to, speak with him, Cypher was seized by the Custodes, not with blades drawn, but with cold procedural finality. No struggle, no resistance. They took him as if they had always known this moment would come. He was shackled, masked, and detained. The Terran records call it the containment of the renegade. As if he had simply wandered too far, as if he was just another rogue psyker to be catalogued and filed. But that was a lie, because the moment Cypher was taken, he vanished. The cell that held him was found empty mere days later. No breaches, no evidence of warp tampering, no damage to the seals. He was simply gone, as if he had never been there at all. The Dark Angels, when they learned of these events, responded with a fury not seen since the days of the heresy. Strike forces were recalled. Entire subsectors were scoured. The Inner Circle convened emergency councils across multiple successor chapters. The thought that Cypher had reached Terra, that he had stood within the Emperor's presence, even briefly, was a truth too bitter to swallow. What had he said? What had he seen? No one knew, and no one who might have known was talking. But the implications rippled outward like a shockwave. If Cypher could fight alongside Guilliman, if a Fallen could walk the same path as a Primarch, then what did it mean for the hunt? What did it mean for the notion of irredeemable betrayal? Because in that moment, the lines blurred. The traitor had acted with loyalty. The heretic had stood with the demigod of the Imperium, and those who hunted him, the unforgiven, were left staring into the abyss of their own contradictions. There are still those within the Dark Angels who refuse to believe it, who claim it was a deception, a lie spread by chaos to sow doubt, that Cypher never stood beside Guilliman, that any such tale is apocryphal, heretical, poison whispered to weaken the chapter's resolve. But there are others, older, wiser, more weary, who believe. And for them, the truth is even more dangerous. Because if Cypher did help Guilliman, if he truly risked himself for the Emperor's chosen son, then he is not merely the most hunted man in the galaxy, he is the most important. For 10,000 years, the Dark Angels have hunted the Fallen in the name of redemption. But what if Cypher is the one leading them toward it? What if, in his silent pilgrimage, in his inscrutable war against chaos and blind loyalty alike, he is laying the foundation for a greater truth, not the restoration of the past? but a future where the fallen are no longer defined by their fall. He aided a primarch, he bore the lion's sword, and he vanished before he could speak. But what would he have said if he had reached the golden throne? What would the emperor have answered? No one knows. But some believe the question was not for the emperor at all. It was for the Imperium, and it has yet to be answered. They are not supposed to exist. Ask a Lord Inquisitor, and they'll scoff. Ask a chapter master outside the Unforgiven, and they'll speak of superstition, of old Calibanite myths whispered by paranoid astartes. Ask a planetary governor, and he might recall a strange green-armored warrior who saved his world from a demonic incursion, then vanished into the fog. But he won't report it. He'll bury the memory like a bad dream. Because the fallen are more than renegades. They are legends. And legends in the Imperium of Man are dangerous things. They are whispered across war-torn stars, their names distorted by time and fear. Among rogue traders and frontier worlds, tales persist of dark angels descending in silence, bearing neither heraldry nor purpose. In some stories, they are saviors, figures who arrive in the nick of time, cutting down heretics and Xenos alike, leaving only scorched ground and unanswered questions behind. In others, they are executioners, slaughtering whole garrisons for reasons no one understands. Their eyes haunted, their voices hollow. Few realize they are one and the same. There is a tavern song on a mining moon in the Damocles Gulf. It tells of a knight in green armor who walks into the desert at dusk, fighting whatever horrors emerge from the sand each night. He never speaks, he never removes his helm, but he always returns. Locals leave offerings, candles, ration bars, bullets, on a stone altar carved with winged iconography they do not recognize. They call him the Ghost Saint. The song ends with a warning. If you try to follow him, you disappear. Just like the monsters. The Dark Angels know better. They've been to that moon. They found no evidence of the man. No trace. Only a single broken pauldron with First Legion markings older than the heresy. And an altar that had been moved, facing north now. Other tales are darker. On Malak Prime, a Mechanicus Forge world fallen to chaos, a data recovery team from the Iron Hands found corrupted machine priests nailed to cathedral walls, each one executed with precise identical bolt shots to the skull. Upon the altar was a data slate containing schematics to an STC long thought lost. The slate was encoded in Old Calibanite. The recovery team never submitted the data to the Fabricator General. Within 72 hours, a Dark Angel strike cruiser entered orbit. No requests were made, no negotiations held, the data was taken. The team was reassigned, their memories purged for operational integrity. The only clue left behind was a carved inscription on the shattered altar. Redemption is earned. In the underhive of Gethix VI, a child once claimed to have met an angel. He said the angel was broken, not in body but in soul. That he spoke of a time before the Imperium, before even the Ecclesiarchy. That he wept without tears and his hands trembled when he touched a rosarius. The child was dismissed as mad. But a visiting Sister Hospitalaire who interviewed him made note of a strange detail. The angel's armor was ancient, its plating too smooth, too curved, bearing script she could not translate. 3 days later, the child vanished. The sister was never seen again. Her report was intercepted in transit by a Ravenwing detachment. These stories are not anomalies. They are part of a pattern. The fallen, those who wander the galaxy alone, leave echoes in their wake. Their presence distorts local events, turns tides of war, shifts the balance in forgotten corners of the Imperium. They appear in times of crisis, then vanish without fanfare. Sometimes they kill, sometimes they save. always they leave behind confusion and a hint of something deeper, something deliberate. It is as if they are performing penance without asking permission, as if they believe that by doing something, anything, they might tip the scales of their damnation, if only slightly. Some operate in isolation, others in pairs. A few, rare and secretive, have formed microcells, bound by old oaths and new visions. They take no orders, they fly no banners, yet they act with chilling coordination when the time comes. These are not simple renegades, they are actors in a silent secret drama whose ending no one knows. The Imperium, bloated with bureaucracy and suspicion, cannot reconcile such stories. To admit that the Fallen exist is to admit that a founding chapter of the Adeptus Astartes hides something vast and terrible. It is to admit that the Emperor's chosen sons are not infallible, that the great tale of unity is cracked beneath its golden surface. So the legends are dismissed, reports are lost, witnesses disappear, and the Fallen remain, moving in the dark, haunting the edges of history. The Unforgiven know the stories well. They track them, catalog them. They call them echoes. There is a vault deep within the rock, sealed with triple-layered wards and psychometric locks, where these echoes are recorded. Some are just data, timestamps, intercepted Vox transmissions, picked captures too blurry to verify. Others are entire dossiers, collected from decades of surveillance and investigation. Each echo is a thread in a web the Inner Circle has tried and failed to unravel. The haunting part? Many of the echoes suggest behavior not aligned with chaos. In fact, they seem purposeful, redemptive. There is one report, rarely spoken of, even among the highest ranks. It tells of a world on the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, a world under siege by an orc horde numbering in the millions. No reinforcements came, no hope remained, until the skies opened and 10 figures descended. 10 warriors in black-green armor. They fought with the fury of angels and the precision of legends. Within a week, the Wa was broken. The orc war boss was executed. The world saved. The 10 never asked for reward. They simply vanished. But when a Deathwing strike team arrived to investigate, they found the site of the final battle. The war boss's head was impaled on a broken plasma sword, its hilt wrapped in parchment bearing a single word: forgive. What do these stories mean? Are the Fallen repenting? Are they organizing? Or are they playing a longer game, one the Imperium can't see? The truth is maddening. For every tale of nobility, there is one of atrocity. A village massacred, a convent torched, a rogue psyker's mind shattered beyond recovery. The Fallen are not saints. They are not devils. They are complicated, and complications are dangerous in a regime built on certainty. That is why they are hunted. Not just for their sins, but for their ambiguity. Because a traitor can be killed, but a legend must be buried. The Dark Angels do not tolerate the stories. They destroy them wherever they arise, not because they fear the truth, but because they fear the questions. What if the Fallen aren't beyond redemption? What if the hunt is not justice, but obsession? What if the line between unforgiven and forgotten is thinner than a blade? So the legends spread, told in hushed voices, traded in hidden corners, scrawled on the walls of prison cells and the hulls of drifting derelicts. The galaxy forgets, the Imperium denies. But in the dark, where candles flicker and prayers falter, there are still those who believe in them. The ghosts in green, the angels who fell, the warriors who walk between fire and silence, looking for a truth they were never allowed to speak. They are the Fallen, and their story is not finished. 10,000 years of silence, 10,000 years of war, betrayal, secrecy, and above it all, a haunting absence. The galaxy has screamed in the long dark since the Emperor fell upon the Golden Throne, but none screamed louder in silence than the sons of the First Legion. For while other chapters prayed for their Primarch's return as a matter of ritual, the Dark Angels needed his return. Not for guidance, not for glory, but for something far more dangerous: judgment. And then, in the dying years of the 41st millennium, as the galaxy cracked in two and the warp tore open its jaws, the Lion returned, but not as they remembered him. They had once called him Lion L. Johnson, first among equals, the Emperor's mysterious son, the blade of truth and reason in an age of conquest. He had led them from the forests of Caliban to the furthest reaches of the stars, but he had disappeared amid the cataclysm of their homeworld's destruction. Not confirmed dead, not entombed, simply gone. For millennia, the Dark Angels waited, hoped, feared. Some whispered he slept beneath the rock itself, deep within the core of their mobile fortress monastery, beyond the reach of time. Others believed he had perished in the warp, consumed by the sins of his sons. But the inner circle never gave up hope, not because they had faith, but because they had to believe that when the Lion returned, he would set everything right. He would absolve them, or condemn them. His return came not with fanfare, not with a host of trumpets, but with the death-silent steps of a solitary giant. From the ruins of the Imperium Nihilus, where psychic storms screamed and demons ruled like gods, came a whisper of movement, a figure cloaked in a mantle of shadows, clad in armor darker than midnight, bearing a blade that glowed with cold light. He emerged not from a stasis field or a monument, but from myth itself, an ancient being awoken by the cries of a dying galaxy. He was changed, older, quieter. There was wisdom in his silence and wrath in his gaze. His presence was not commanding. It was inevitable. Where he walked, reality bent slightly, as though the universe remembered its order and tried to correct itself. The Lion had returned, and he was not pleased. He did not call for banners. He did not demand fealty. He did not even contact the Imperium. For a time, the Lion walked the stars alone, or nearly so. The Watchers in the dark, those silent, hooded beings who had shadowed him since Caliban, walked with him, serving as heralds and guides. In his path, planets were liberated. Chaos warbands were shattered by a blade no mortal could follow. Demon princes screamed his name before vanishing into nothing. Yet still, he remained a secret, until he chose to reveal himself. It was not to Guilliman that he first came, nor to Terra. It was to his sons, the Dark Angels. The inner circle received the summons with a mixture of awe and terror. Grand Masters wept. Chaplains fell silent. For the first time in 10 millennia, the very leaders of the hunt stood upon the edge of being hunted themselves. They gathered in secret, as they always had, aboard the rock. The ancient halls, lined with the banners of battles long hidden, echoed with apprehension. And then the Lion stepped into the chamber, not as a god, as their father. And he knew. Without a word spoken, he saw it in their eyes, the shame, the fear, the burden they had carried alone for so long. And in that moment, everything they had feared came true. The Lion remembered the fall of Caliban. He remembered Luther's betrayal. He remembered the cataclysm, the fight, the storm, and he remembered the fallen. What followed was not rage. It was not the thunderous rebuke of a betrayed god. It was silence. And in that silence, the Lion passed judgment, not upon the fallen, but upon the way his sons had lived in his absence. He did not condemn the hunt. He understood it, but he saw what it had become: obsession, paranoia, a blind cycle of violence and secrecy that no longer served penance. It served fear, and fear was no foundation for redemption. The lion had not returned to punish. He had returned to heal. But only those who chose to heal could be saved. In the dark heart of the rock, the lion spoke a new decree. The fallen who had turned to chaos, who had sold their souls, embraced corruption, were still enemies. They would be hunted as before, for their crimes were clear. But those who had not succumbed, those who lived in exile, who fought against demons in silence, who wept for what they had done, they were not beyond redemption. They could return, not as dark angels, not as penitents, but as something new, the risen. It was a seismic shift, one that shattered 10,000 years of doctrine in a single breath. The inner circle, sworn to silence, found their world upended. Some resisted, others rejoiced. For centuries they had told themselves there could be no forgiveness, that every fallen was a threat. Now their primarch, the man who had built the Legion, declared otherwise. He was not asking for mercy, he was offering it. Word spread slowly. The lion made no proclamations to the Imperium, no sermons to the High Lords. His message was delivered personally, system by system, conflict by conflict. In the void-haunted reaches of the Segmentum Obscurus, he fought beside a warrior named Zabriel, once a captain of the First Company, long believed lost. Zabriel had resisted chaos, lived in self-imposed exile, and fought for innocence when no one else would. The lion named him the first of the risen, not forgiven, not exonerated, but welcomed. This act sent tremors through the fallen. Across the galaxy, those in hiding felt something shift. Some scoffed, calling it a trick, a trap. Others burned their armor in silent mourning, unwilling to believe redemption was real. But a few listened, and the hunt changed. The Raven Wings still ride, and the Death Wings still strike. But now, in certain cases, there are words before war, offers made, trials held, redemption not as a guarantee, but as a possibility. The fallen are still divided, still dangerous, but they are no longer without hope. The lion's return did not end the Dark Angel's secret war, but it redefined it. No longer was the hunt just a chase through shadow. Now it was a test. Who among the fallen would choose to return? Who among the unforgiven would accept them? And in the end, who among the astartes would understand that perhaps the greatest strength is not in vengeance, but in forgiveness freely offered and earned through fire? Lionel Johnson walks the stars once more, but he does not lead an army. He gathers the lost. He mends what was broken. And for the first time in 10,000 years, a new possibility burns in the hearts of those who were cast out. They can rise, not as what they were, but as what they were always meant to be. From the ashes of betrayal, a new fire rises. It began as a whisper, barely audible beneath the weight of centuries. But with the lion's return, that whisper became a voice not crying for vengeance or penance, but for something long thought impossible: reconciliation. The Dark Angels had hunted the fallen across 10 millennia, burying their shame beneath bolt shells and flame. Entire chapters of history erased, entire lives consumed by a secret war few would ever understand. For so long, the unforgiven had lived not for victory, but for atonement. They had defined themselves by the absence of redemption, by the very impossibility of forgiveness. And now that foundation had cracked, because Lionel Johnson had not returned with thunderbolts or demands for sacrifice. He had not raised the rock or judged his sons in fire. He had offered them something far more dangerous, a new way forward. He had seen what the millennia had done. He had read it in their silence, in the way the inner circle refused to meet his gaze, in the haunted pride of the Deathwing, in the urgency of the Raven Wing's endless pursuit. Their loyalty was unbreakable, but their purpose had twisted, from justice to obsession, from duty to doctrine. Lionel Janssen was not blind to their pain, but he saw through it, past the dogma, past the fury, and in the quiet hours of his return, he had begun something none of them had dared imagine. He had begun to speak with the fallen, not to interrogate, not to condemn, but to listen. The first to hear him was Zabriel. Once a captain of the First Company, Zabriel had been a legend in his time. His fall had been quiet, not a champion of chaos nor a roaring traitor, but a man swept up in Luther's rebellion, unsure, disillusioned, loyal to something, but unsure to whom. When the warp storm had stolen him from Caliban, he had awoken to a galaxy broken beyond recognition. He did not rage, he did not conquer. He hid. For centuries, Zabriel walked forgotten battlefields, aiding when he could, vanishing when pursued. He lived like a ghost, keeping the oaths he had once made, even as the Imperium labeled him heretic. He killed cultists in the ruins of once holy shrines. He defended pilgrim ships from pirate fleets. He prayed to a throne he could no longer serve. And then, at the edge of a shattered world torn by Khorne's madness, the Lion found him. What passed between them has never been recorded. There were no witnesses, only the aftermath. A chaos horde, broken and scattered, a city of refugees spared annihilation. And standing beside the Lion for the first time in 10,000 years was Zabriel. Not as a prisoner, not as prey, but as brother. From that moment, something changed. Zabriel's return was not a symbol of pardon, nor a rewriting of the past. He did not excuse what had happened on Caliban. He did not claim innocence, but he also did not beg. He stood tall, his eyes steady, and the Lion accepted him, not blindly, not without scrutiny, but with purpose. For Zabriel had not given himself to chaos. He had not blasphemed, nor schemed, nor corrupted. He had endured, and that endurance, the Lion decreed, was enough to warrant a second chance. Thus was the first of the risen named. The word was chosen carefully, not redeemed. Redemption implies a debt paid, but the debt of the fallen is one that cannot be measured. How do you weigh a shattered brotherhood, a sundered world, a wound that bleeds across time? Risen meant something else. It meant choice, the choice to rise again. Not as what they were, not as what others believed they should be, but as something new. A warrior reborn, not in the fires of loyalty, nor in the pits of repentance, but in the quiet strength of clarity. They would not erase their sins, they would transcend them. The Lion's decree spread in secret, like an ember beneath snow. Not all accepted it. Among the unforgiven, there was resistance. Hardliners in the inner circle viewed the Risen as a betrayal of everything they had fought for. They argued that trust was a currency the Fallen had spent to nothing, that one Zabriel could not erase 1,000 traitors. And yet others listened. Some saw in the Risen an opportunity to heal, not just the Fallen, but themselves, to end the ceaseless grind of the hunt, to reclaim their Primarch's original vision, not a legion forever seeking punishment, but a brotherhood founded on unity and strength. The Raven Wing, ever the hunters, were the slowest to change, but even among them, whispers began. Could the hunted now become the guides? Could the Fallen teach the hunters what it meant to endure the hunt? In the years that followed the Lion's return, others came. Not many, but enough. Warriors who had hidden in the void, living in exile, emerged from the shadows. Some answered directly to the Lion's summons. Others found their way through sheer providence. One came from a Blackstone fortress, another from a world thought lost to the Tyranids. A third, silent and gaunt, arrived alone in a dead Eldar craft world, bearing only a broken blade and the words, "I heard the Lion's voice." Each was tested, not with fire or blade, but with truth. The Risen were not granted rank. They were not permitted into the inner circle, not yet. but they were acknowledged, accepted, watched, and when the time came, they were called upon. On the world of Targ of Primus, where chaos cults threatened to awaken a demon engine of immense power, it was Zabriel and 3 other Risen who led the strike. The battle was brutal, an assault through corrupted tunnels and void-infested catacombs. None of the Risen wore chapter markings, none bore heraldry, but their deeds spoke volumes. The engine was destroyed, the cult scattered, and not one Risen fell. When they returned, they did not ask for praise. They asked simply, where next? A new brotherhood was forming, not a legion, not a chapter. Something older and yet entirely new. A covenant of warriors whose identities were not defined by their past, but by their choices in the present. The Lion watched over them. He did not command them as he once had the First Legion. He walked among them, quiet, distant. But when they spoke, he listened. And when they asked, "Are we worthy?" he answered, "You are here." That is enough. Still, not all the fallen accepted this path. Some refused to believe the Lion had returned at all. Others spat on the idea of atonement. They viewed the Risen as collaborators, traitors to their rebellion. These holdouts, hardened by centuries of hatred, warped by their own dogma, became more dangerous than ever. The war between the unforgiven and the fallen had become a war of ideals, not just survival, and caught between both were the Risen. Warriors without a home, forging one anew in the fires of battle and conviction. So now, across the stars, there are 2 kinds of legends. The fallen, still hunted, and the Risen, still judged. Both wear the scars of Caliban, both remember the Lion. But only one chooses to walk toward him. The new brotherhood is not perfect. It is not large, but it is growing, not in numbers, in meaning. Each Risen is a symbol, not of forgiveness, but of possibility. And that is the most dangerous thing of all, not for the Imperium, but for those who would rather history stay buried, for those who fear that maybe, just maybe, the Lion's sons were never meant to live in darkness forever. Some names echo like war cries, Gilliman, Russ, Dawn, spoken in triumph, remembered in stone. Others linger like curses, whispered behind sealed doors, Luther, Cypher, Marbas. But then there are the names that live in silence, waiting, unspoken by history, because they do not fit easily into legend or shame. Names that change the course of fate not with thunder, but with choice. Zabriel is one such name. Long before he became a symbol, before the Lion called him Risen, Zabriel was a captain of the First Company, a master of the blade, a tactician honed by the Lion's own hand, and a beacon of discipline within the First Legion. In the days before the fall of Caliban, his loyalty had been absolute. His warriors followed him not out of fear or blind obedience, but trust. He exemplified the Legion's duality, martial excellence and quiet introspection, wrapped in the grim resolve that marked the Dark Angels from their inception. But loyalty is a complex thing. It is tested not in moments of peace, but in the crucible of betrayal. When Luther's rebellion broke open like a wound, Zabriel found himself caught between 2 truths, his oath to the Lion and the bonds he had forged with the warriors left under Luther's command. He had not been a vocal supporter of the sedition. He had not raised his sword against the Lion during the final battle, but he had hesitated. And in the eyes of the inner circle, hesitation was enough. When the warp tore Caliban apart and cast its sons into the screaming void, Zabriel was among those scattered. Not lost, not consumed, just displaced. He awoke on the edge of a dead system, aboard a crippled strike cruiser buried half dead in the rings of a gas giant. His memories were fragmented, his last clear thought the sonic boom of the Lion's arrival above Caliban. His armor was scorched, his blade dulled, his soul uncertain. There was no hunt, no brothers, no imperium, only silence. And so Zabriel began to walk. He did not succumb to chaos. That was never in him. He feared the warp's whispers, abhorred its unnatural touch. When demons crawled through the minds of lesser men, Zabriel resisted. Not with prayer, not with rage, but with memory. He remembered the lessons of the lion: discipline, restraint, duty. They became his armor in exile. He wandered war zones and ruins alike, a ghost in broken power armor, helping when he could, hiding when he must. On the world of Venlar 9, he stood alone against a Genestealer cult that had hollowed out the ruling elite. No one knew who he was. No one saw his face. But when the PDF finally stormed the palace, they found the Magus dead at the altar, a bloodied blade laid across his chest. In time, the name Zabriel became a rumor, a phantom said to appear when hope had failed entirely. The Archangel, the Grey Guardian, the last of Caliban. He never claimed these names. He never claimed anything. He just kept walking. The moment that would change everything came on the demon world of Carallon. Khorne had laid claim to the planet, twisting its blood-soaked soil into a hunting ground for his favored warbands. An Astra Militarum crusade had been sent, 3 regiments strong, only to be butchered and offered to the Skull Throne. The Mechanicus petitioned for exterminatus, but the signal never reached high command, because the warp was screaming. And into that madness stepped the lion. The battle is chronicled in secret only, not for public archives, not even for most Dark Angels. A black-armored figure moved through the red mist, blade singing, flanked by strange robed creatures who distorted perception itself. The daemons faltered, the bloodthirsters howled, and from the ruins of a shattered basilica emerged another figure, his armor ancient, his colors faded, a Calibanite blade in his grip. He and the lion met not as enemies, not as strangers, but as reflections. Neither spoke of the past, only the present. Side by side, they fought through the demon hordes. Zabriel's strikes were precise but restrained. He did not fight with the fury of vengeance, but with the clarity of purpose. The lion saw this. He saw more. When the last of the blood spawn had fallen, the lion turned to Zabriel and asked a question no one had asked in 10,000 years. "Are you ready to come home?" And Zabriel, without hesitation, replied, "I never left." The declaration sent ripples through the entire Unforgiven Brotherhood. Zabriel became the first of the Risen, but he was more than a symbol. He was a test. His actions would decide whether this path, this dangerous, tenuous path toward reconciliation, could be more than theory. He accepted the burden without flinching. The inner circle did not make it easy. He was questioned, monitored, shadowed, every step scrutinized, every decision recorded. Zabriel met it all with unwavering composure. He did not rage against their suspicion. He understood it. He had worn it once. He led kill teams into Necron tombs, hunted rogue psychers along the edge of the maelstrom, dismantled chaos cults in hive cities the Inquisition dared not enter, always without recognition, always with silence. But the most powerful of his acts came not in battle, but in the recruitment of other fallen. Zabriel became the lion's emissary to the lost. He tracked them, not to capture, not to kill, but to speak, to listen. He offered no bribes, no sanctuary, just truth. Some spat in his face, others drew blades. A few listened, and from that few the Risen grew. Not many, never many, but enough to show that it was possible, that guilt did not have to be eternal, that penance did not have to be pain. He is not universally loved. Even among the Risen there are whispers. Some say he is too soft, others too loyal. Some call him a bridge, others a traitor in reverse, one who abandoned the fallen for the empty promises of a broken imperium. But none doubt his conviction. Zabriel carries no rank in the formal sense, no chapter badge, no company designation. He answers only to the lion, but his word matters. When he speaks, even the most hardened unforgiven listen, because he is not a theory, he is proof. There are those who believe he will lead the Risen someday, not as a warlord, but as a witness, a figure whose presence reminds both the unforgiven and the fallen that choice is still possible. He walks between extremes, between past and future, between damnation and hope. And in that fragile space, he forges a new path, not for glory, not for redemption, but for meaning. Zabriel's name is not carved into the halls of honor. You won't find it in imperial records. But among the fallen, his legend grows, not as a conqueror, not as a prophet, but as a man who stood before his Primarch with blood on his hands and was not cast down, but raised, the first of the Risen. In the vastness of the Imperium, where stars die unlamented and worlds vanish into the hungering dark, there are few words more sacred or more dangerous than redemption. To most, it is a prayer, a hope for the Emperor's mercy. To others, it is a lie. But for the Sons of the Lion, it is something far more complex. For them, redemption is not granted. It is hunted, bled for, earned, if it can be earned at all. And now, for the first time in 10,000 years, it has a name, the Risen. They are not a chapter. They do not bear a single badge or heraldry. They do not claim a fortress monastery or a place in the Codex Astartes. They have no line in the imperial registers and no presence on Terra's records. But they are real. They walk among the stars, shaped by silence and fire, carrying not just bolters and blades, but the weight of an impossible hope. The Risen are the fallen who have turned their backs on chaos, the ones who endured the long exile, the ones who did not forget what they once were, even when the galaxy demanded they become monsters. And now, beneath the shadow of a returned Primarch, they rise again. It did not begin with a speech. The Lion did not declare them from a marble pulpit or parade them before the galaxy. That is not how the First Legion acts. The First Legion remembers. It rebuilds in silence. It does not cry victory. It earns it moment by moment, breath by breath. Zabriel was the first, but not the last. In the months following his emergence, other fallen began to respond to the whispers. Not many, but enough. From shattered void stations and dead hive cities, from the depths of demon-haunted sectors and asteroid catacombs, they emerged, not boldly, not as conquerors, but willingly. Each of them faced scrutiny beyond imagination. They were brought before the Lion or his chosen envoys, interrogated, not with chains and pain, but with truth. They were asked not to confess, not to grovel. They were asked only to be honest. Had they embraced the ruinous powers? Had they led innocents to death? Had they become the enemy the Dark Angels believed them to be? Those who lied were cast out, silently, permanently. Those who told the truth, however bitter, were permitted a second path, the path of the Risen. To become Risen is not to be forgiven. It is to accept what one has done and choose to live despite it. There is no ritual, no ceremony, no cleansing flame or genetic realignment. The Risen are not washed of their sins. They wear them like scars, they own them, but they do not dwell in them. They move forward. Their armor is unique, not repainted, but adapted. Some Risen wear ancient Mark III plate, pitted and scarred but functional. Others forge new suits from scavenged remnants, markings obscured, replaced with subtle iconography. A sword, broken and reforged. A winged helm split down the middle. The Ouroboros, symbol of eternal return. They do not fight in formation like a codex chapter. They do not march in squads. They operate in cells, strike teams and pairs. They appear without warning, deliver death to those who serve chaos, and vanish before questions can be asked. And when they must fight with the Dark Angels, they do so under the Lion's direct banner. Only he may command them. Only he may name them. Only he understands what they are. For the rest of the unforgiven, the risen are still a wound. Not infected, perhaps, but unhealed. Some see them as traitors in sheep's armor. They whisper of hidden motives, of schemes beneath the surface. They wonder if this redemption is merely a tactic, a trick to undermine the hunt. Others, more progressive or simply more weary, see in the risen something rare and precious. Not weakness, but strength. To walk away from chaos, without praise, without reward, and offer oneself back to those who have hunted you for millennia. That is not cowardice, that is conviction. The risen are given tasks no others can perform. They infiltrate worlds corrupted by chaos cults and turn their own lies against them. They walk into demonic enclaves, speaking the ancient tongues of the damned, and set fire to their foundations from within. They are not just warriors, they are weapons of experience. They know the enemy in ways the loyal cannot, because once they stood beside it, and then they chose not to. But the life of a risen is not glorious. There are no chapels in their honor, no songs sung. They are watched, always, not from distrust alone, but from necessity, for a risen is never far from the edge of falling again. They tread the knife's edge between damnation and deliverance, and the galaxy offers no handrails. Some do not survive the strain. One was executed after succumbing to the whispers again. Another disappeared into the eye of terror, leaving only a single message scrawled into the walls of his last refuge. I wanted to believe. Even in redemption, there is no certainty, only the struggle. And yet, they continue to come. Not in great numbers, not in legions, but enough. Each risen is a story, a testimony, a choice made again and again, every waking moment. The lion leads them, not from above, but among. He speaks little, but when he fights, they follow. He does not praise, he does not scold. He simply is, a presence that holds their purpose together like gravity. Some say he still doubts them. Others believe he sees in them a shadow of what the First Legion was always meant to be. Not perfect, but human. Not flawless, but honest. There is no prophecy for the risen, no guarantee that this fragile experiment will endure. The galaxy may yet swallow them whole. The hunt may resume. The Imperium may never accept them. And the Dark Angels themselves remain torn, split between their ancient oaths and this new truth their father has laid before them. But in the ashes of their exile, the risen have found something. Not salvation, not absolution, but direction. A way to walk forward without pretending the past never happened. A path that is harder than penance, but purer than vengeance. Across the stars, scattered like starlight in a dying cosmos, the risen move in silence. Their footsteps leave no glory. Their names are not remembered. But when chaos stirs, when the Emperor's light dims, when the screams rise and the prayers fall silent, they are there. And when they are asked, "Who are you?" they do not say Dark Angels. They do not say forgiven. They say, "I am one who rose." And that is enough. For now,